In Judges 20, there's a story that I think would make a great movie. It would either be a war movie or an outrageous thriller or one that might even be called a horror film, and maybe you feel like your own life could be played out as a horror film as well. But in this story, in Judges 20, a horrific act of rape takes place, and the woman that was raped, her body was cut into pieces, and each piece was sent to the different regions of the Israelites demanding retribution because somebody from one of those camps had committed this horrific crime. If that was the opening scene of a film, it might be a blockbuster just because of the shock of this story opener, a woman's body cut into pieces and distributed among a group of people. That attracts viewers. They knew this act had been committed by someone from the tribe of Benjamin, so the rest of the Israelites came together and decided to give the Benjamites what they deserved. So in verse 11, it says they came together united as one. If you've ever felt like you've had a great injustice done to you or yours, it would be very encouraging before you move forward to have a united army to go out before you and fight, right? It seemed like a sure victory. But look what they were up against. It says in verse 16 that all of those in the Benjamin camp from where the crime was committed, there were 700 troops that were left-handed, and it says each of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. And that's the reason the name of this devotion is called Never Missed a Hair. Imagine that scene in a movie where a huge army of left-handers are slinging stones across a field at strands of hair and not missing a single one. I'd watch that movie for sure. And who in their right mind would go up against such an army? A unified group that seeks God's wisdom first is what happened. And in verse 18, the Israelites asked God what to do and who to send in to fight. And on the first day of fighting, even though they were unified and even though they asked for direction, they lost 22,000 at the hands of these left-handed marksmen. I'd be discouraged, wouldn't you? And I'm not sure I would continue to fight, but I'd want to go home. But the verse for today's Devo says, in verse 22, the Israelites encouraged one another and took up their positions where they had stationed themselves the first day. And where was that? That was at the foot of God, asking for prayer. They were not going to be discouraged. They knew they had asked God and they knew they had obeyed. So they inquired again and were told to fight again. And at this time, another 18,000 fell. By now, in this movie, viewers would be squirming in their seats at the audacity of God to tell people to go out and fight and then allow them to be slaughtered by the enemy twice. That's a sure recipe for a lifetime of discouragement. But the people, this whole army that was unified, went to Bethel, which is the house of God, and they sat weeping. They felt defeated, grief-stricken at the loss, but then they started offering burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Burnt offerings represented surrender. Fellowship offerings represented thanksgiving, and they asked God what to do. That's amazing to me. They've been defeated twice. They obeyed God's directives, but now they're willing to surrender to his ways and give thanks and inquire again. Are they gluttons for punishment? They know that only in God will their deliverance be had, because that's the character of the God they follow. And God tells them to go again, and this time the enemy will fall. So spending time in God's presence enabled them to get up once more in obedience because they knew God and God knew them. At first it seems like they were being defeated again this time, but then things turned around. 25,000 Benjamites were struck down with the sword, and these amazing, never missed a hair marksmen began to run the other way, and another 18,000 were struck down. And then it says the Israelites easily overran and cut down 5,000 more, and then another 2,000. 25,000 valiant fighters fell, and even the 600 that did escape to small towns were eventually burned and destroyed. No more enemies. It should be that as we age and skirmishes occur in our lives, full-out wars that we experience, that we grow more in tune with God and his ways and lean on him over and over again, even when defeat is at our doors. That's what happened in this story. They knew the God they had walked through in the wilderness. They recalled his goodness, observed his ways, even when defeat occurred, and they knew he was their only source for victory. They didn't sit and question and raise a fist in discouragement and defeat, but instead they came together and worshiped and surrendered their hearts and lives in the middle of defeat and loss and heard God's voice again. And eventually they saw the most ruthless enemy completely annihilated. Why did God let them experience those two huge losses before the amazing win? I have no idea, but I've wasted plenty of time in my life asking why instead of asking what to do next, sitting and worshiping at His feet and surrendering. These people knew that to find encouragement, they needed to visit God over and over again, talk to Him, worship Him, and surrender until every intruder was gone. So be encouraged and play out this movie in your mind over and over again until you get out of your seat at the end of the film and say, yes, because God is a better marksman than even men that never miss a hair. God knows the actual numbers of the hairs on your head. So take that, enemy.